I'm Jenna Middaugh. Coming up on 11 News at noon, it's day 10 of protests in Colorado Springs, and the citywide curfew has been lifted. What the mayor says about extending that curfew. Plus, casinos and movie theaters are open for business in Teller County, what safety guidelines they have to follow. And we're under an 11 breaking weather alert today. Meteorologist Lucy Bergman is tracking wind and snow in the forecast. Join us at noon.
This is KKTV 11 News at noon.
As protests enter their 10th day in Colorado Springs, the citywide curfew has been lifted. The mayor's expectations going forward. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Jenna Middaugh. We are under an 11 breaking weather alert today. Let's get right to meteorologist Lucy Bergman. Lucy, what are the winds like right now?
Well, Jenna, we are starting to see those winds pick up.
Thank you, Lucy. We have an update now. Colorado Springs is no longer under a citywide curfew. Mayor John Suthers announced this morning that he would not be extending the 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew. It went into effect Wednesday night and lasted until 5 this morning. The mayor says the goal was to keep protests peaceful, and it worked. He says he will not hesitate to reinstate the curfew if violence and property damage starts back up again. And protests are continuing in Colorado Springs for the 10th day today. Things have stayed peaceful over the weekend. Church leaders and community members even held a prayer walk Saturday morning. 11 News reporter Spencer Wilson joins us live now at City Hall, where the protests have been starting each day. Spencer, how are things going right now?
Jenna, you can see there's a couple of folks out here.
Thank you very much, Spencer. Right now, a final public memorial for George Floyd is happening in Texas, where he grew up. Floyd's casket arrived at a Houston church where a public viewing for him is being held today. It's been 2 weeks since he died after a police officer in Minneapolis kneeled on the back of his neck for nearly 9 minutes. Floyd's death inspired global protests against racism and police brutality.
The American public is responding to this murder.
Inside the church, there are dividers on the aisles and stickers on the floor to maintain social distancing. Tomorrow, there will be an invitation-only memorial service and burial. New today, more businesses are starting to reopen in southern Colorado. Movie theaters and casinos are now allowed to operate in Teller County. The state health department says all places are limited to 50% capacity and no more than 175 people inside total. For movie theaters, each group has to have at least 3 seats between them, and people can only play slots at the casinos. Gaming tables will be considered again in about 3 weeks. It's been a deadly week on the roads here in Colorado Springs. A person driving a motorcycle died last night in the Broadmoor area. Police say the rider crashed in a roundabout and was thrown from the motorcycle. Officers are still investigating whether speed, alcohol, or drugs were involved. CSPD says this is the 5th person to die on the roads in Colorado Springs within the past week. And we now know the names of 2 men who were killed in a horrific crash last week. CSPD says 19-year-old Matthew Guyon and 21-year-old Quentin Jones died after their car ran a red light and crashed into the side of a semi, pinning the car underneath. Both men were Fort Carson soldiers. A third man in the car was taken to the hospital and is expected to survive. Police think speeding was a factor in this crash. Developing now, firefighters in Pueblo County are trying to figure out how an RV caught fire this morning. It happened off Highway 50 and McCullough Boulevard in Pueblo West around 8:30. Firefighters say people were getting ready to leave on a camping trip when they noticed smoke was coming out of the back of the RV. No one was hurt in this fire. Starting today, Colorado Springs city buses are making changes to address overcrowding issues. Mountain Metro Transit says it's adjusting some routes to make sure people can adhere to social distancing guidelines while riding the bus. 2 routes that don't have a lot of riders are being temporarily suspended. Those buses will be used on the routes that are more crowded. There's no time frame for how long these changes will stay in place. George Floyd's death hasn't just sparked protests around the country, it's also paving the way for new legislation. Coming up on 11 News at noon, what changes could be coming to police departments as Congress discusses a new police reform bill. Plus, how soon could libraries and malls reopen in El Paso County? We'll tell you what leaders are talking about. Developing now, a bill that could make it harder to opt out of vaccines is one step closer to becoming state law. The House announced plans to move the controversial bill forward. If it becomes law, Colorado's health department would require parents to follow a submission process if they want to claim a non-medical exemption for an immunization for a religious or personal belief. People protested at the Capitol yesterday, saying they do not agree with the aggressive policies, and they're upset that lawmakers held the hearing on a Sunday.
In the middle of a pandemic.
The bill is expected to be debated by the full state house this week. Happening tomorrow, El Paso County leaders are set to talk about reopening more businesses. The Board of County Commissioners is scheduled to meet to discuss what it would look like to reopen libraries, movie theaters, malls, the indoor water park at Great Wolf Lodge, and the Olympic Training Center. Leaders say they're not ready to open bars, arcades, or fairs yet. The commissioners are set to meet at 9 tomorrow morning. We will let you know what happens. George Floyd's death has sparked a larger debate about police reform and funding. Congress is tackling the issue today, unveiling legislation to bring more accountability and transparency to departments across the country. Skylar Henry has the details from the White House. President Trump has already tied former Vice President Joe Biden to the calls for defunding the police. However, the presumptive Democratic nominee has yet to weigh in on the issue. Lucy?
All right, Jenna.
Snow in June pretty much sums up Colorado, doesn't it? Well, the more we wear masks, the more they can be itchy and uncomfortable to put on. Coming up on 11 News at noon, hear from experts how to keep your mask clean and your skin healthy. New at noon, with masks the new norm in many areas, you probably know they're not always comfortable and can irritate your skin. Naomi Ruckham has advice on how to keep your skin healthy.
Across the country,
Dr. Kata also recommends you avoid applying thick makeup under a mask if possible, and if you're not prone to acne, use a thick lotion to create a barrier between your skin and the mask. All good tips. Developing now, exactly 2 weeks after the death of George Floyd, there are calls to rethink policing in cities around the country. The majority of Minneapolis City Council members have promised to dismantle the city's police department and replace it with a new system of public safety. Before they can do that, though, they need to have a plan for that new system in place, something that's not ready yet. When asked if he would consider defunding the department as an option, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey ruled it out.
If you're asking whether I'm for...
Frey says he considers police reform to be a better option. Demonstrations over the death of George Floyd spread across 6 continents over the weekend. In London, thousands masked against COVID gathered outside the American Embassy. In Australia, the focus of the protests in Sydney was on Aboriginal people beaten or killed in police custody.
At the end of the day,
protests were also held in Paris, Brazil, Rome, Tokyo, and Scotland. In Scotland, demonstrators have started installing new street names, replacing names linked to slavery or slave owners with names of Scottish activists instead.
A little bit of everything this week.
All right, thank you, Lucy. And thank you so much for watching. Remember, KKTV is your breaking news and weather leader. We're always online at kktv.com and on Facebook. See you back here at 4.